Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the legal world of a paying bank and what happens when you write a check. It's a place filled with some really strict rules, pretty high stakes, and this constant balancing act between a bank's duty to pay and its need to protect itself. So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the bank's #1 job. Then we'll get into the drama of what happens when a check gets dishonored. After that, we'll figure out the difference between when a bank is right to refuse payment and when it's wrong. We'll also cover all the reasons a bank can legally say no. And finally, we'll see how all this stuff plays out in real-life court cases.
Okay, first things first. Let's really get to know the main character in this story, the paying banker. You can think of them as the guardian of your money. And their job isn't just about moving numbers around. It's really the bedrock of the trust you have in the entire banking system.
At its most basic, a paying banker's role is pretty simple. They're the ones who are supposed to follow your instructions and pay money out of your account when you tell them to. So when you write a check, you're giving an order, and they are legally supposed to follow it.
Now, this is where it gets interesting. A bank gets legal protection, but it's not a free pass. It only works if they follow 3 really strict conditions. 1, they have to act in good faith. 2, they can't be negligent. And 3, they have to make the payment in due course, which is just a fancy way of saying they followed all the proper procedures and didn't ignore any obvious red flags. These are the absolute non-negotiables that protect the bank.
And yeah, this isn't just a friendly suggestion. It's the law. Section 31 is super clear about it. If the money is in your account and the check is presented correctly, the bank has to pay it. Simple as that. If they don't, they could be on the hook for any losses or damages the refusal causes.
But what happens when the bank doesn't pay? When they break that fundamental rule? Well, that's when we step into the much more complicated territory of a dishonored check. So that moment of refusal has an official name, dishonor. It's the exact point when the bank says, nope, to your payment instruction, and it kicks off a whole chain of potential legal problems.
And this really gets to the heart of the matter. Is every refusal by a bank a mistake on their part? Or are there times when saying no is actually the right thing, and even the legally required thing to do?
That very question leads us down 2 totally different roads. On one side, you've got wrongful refusal, where the bank is clearly in the wrong, and on the other, rightful refusal, where the bank is actually protected by law.
And here it is, the main conflict in a nutshell. A wrongful dishonor is a pretty big deal. It means the money was there, the check was perfectly fine, but the bank just decided not to pay. A rightful dishonor, though, is completely different. That's when the bank has a solid, legally recognized reason to stop the payment in its tracks.
So let's start digging into those legally sound reasons. What exactly gives a bank the right, that legal shield, to dishonor a check without getting into trouble?
The first bunch of reasons all have to do with you, the customer, and the state of your account. The most obvious one is you don't have enough money, right? But it also covers things like the account being closed, or if the bank finds out the customer has passed away or become insolvent. There's also a kind of old-school reason. If the customer becomes an alien enemy, basically a citizen of a country you're at war with, in that case, the bank has to refuse payment.
The key thing to get here is that some events automatically force the bank's hand. For example, when a customer dies or is declared insolvent, the bank is legally required to freeze that account. They have to stop payments to protect the money for the estate or for the people the customer owes money to.
Okay, next up are problems with the actual physical check. Any sign of forgery is a massive red flag, or a signature that doesn't look anything like the one they have on file. Even a check that's been ripped or damaged is cause for concern. This also includes little things, like if the amount written in words doesn't match the numbers, or if someone has clearly altered the check but didn't sign next to the change.
And finally, a bank's duty to pay can get shut down by outside orders. This could be you calling them up and saying stop payment, which is called a countermand. Or it could be something much more serious, like a garnishee order from a court, which is basically a legal notice to freeze your account, usually because of a debt.
Now, these rules aren't just ideas in a textbook. Let's see how the courts have actually handled these situations in real-life disputes, which help turn these principles into solid law.
So let's talk a bit more about that garnishee order. Just to recap, it's a really powerful tool a court can use. It essentially locks down all the money in a person's bank account, often to make sure a debt gets paid.
And the classic court case for this is Rogers versus Whiteley. The decision from that case made things crystal clear. As soon as a bank gets a garnishee order, its duty to the court overrides its duty to the customer. The bank is legally required to dishonor any checks drawn on those frozen funds. Period.
This is just a perfect example of how case law builds a protective bubble around the banks. The court's ruling gives them a rock-solid legal reason for their actions. It shields them from getting sued for wrongful dishonor when they're just following a court order.
And we see the same kind of logic with insolvency. The case of Matthew versus Sherwell set the standard here. It confirmed that as soon as a customer is officially declared insolvent, their assets aren't really theirs anymore. Legal control shifts over to an official assignee, someone who's appointed to manage their finances. So since the money no longer belongs to the customer, the bank's duty also shifts, and they have to refuse to pay their checks.
So as we wrap this up, the biggest thing to remember is this incredibly thin line that banks have to walk every day between their duty to pay you and their duty to protect everyone's interests. And it leaves us with a really big question for today. In a world of instant payments and digital banking, how are these old-school rules, which were designed for paper checks, going to evolve for our new lightning-fast world of money?